The rain hammered against my home office window that Tuesday afternoon, each drop like a tiny reminder that some storms you never see coming. I was deep in code review when my phone buzzed. Melissa's name flashed across the screen, and even before I answered, something in my chest tightened. "Patrick, thank God you picked up," she said, her voice pitched high with panic. "My laptop just completely died. Blue screen, this horrible grinding noise, and now it won't even turn on. I have that presentation for the hospital board tomorrow morning, and everything is on there. Can you work your magic?" I pushed back from my desk, already mentally cataloging the tools I'd need. "Don't worry, Mel. I'll handle it. How's your mom doing?" She's, she's okay. Tired from the chemo yesterday, but she's fighting." Her voice softened. "You're amazing, you know that? I don't know what I'd do without you. Just focus on being there for Dorothy. I'll get your files back, I promise." After we hung up, I stared at the dead laptop she'd left on the kitchen counter that morning. Melissa worked as the development director for Portland Children's Hospital, a position that required constant presentations to donors and board members. She was good at it too, had this way of making people want to help, want to give. I'd watched her work a room at fundraising galas, seen how she could get million-dollar pledges with just the right story told at just the right moment. The laptop was indeed dead. When I pressed the power button, it made a clicking sound like a playing card in bicycle spokes, then nothing. Classic hard drive failure. I'd seen it 100 times in my 15 years as a software architect. The good news was that catastrophic failures like this were rarely complete. With the right tools and patience, I could usually recover most of the data. I removed the drive carefully, connected it to my recovery setup, a specialized dock that could read damaged drives, and started the extraction process. The software estimated 6 hours for a full recovery. While it ran, I decided to organize what I could see of the already recovered files. Melissa's desktop was chaos, exactly as I'd expected. She was brilliant with people but terrible with digital organization. Thousands of files scattered across her desktop, downloads folder overflowing, documents with names like Final version 2 actually final.docs. I created a clean folder structure: hospital presentations, personal photos, financial documents, medical records. As files recovered, I sorted them methodically. Tax returns from the last 5 years went into finances. Pictures from our trip to Cannon Beach last summer went into photos. Her mother's treatment schedules and medical reports went into medical. That's when I found it: a file named bookclubinfo.txt in a folder called Reading Groups. Melissa wasn't in any book clubs. She always said she preferred reading alone, that book clubs were just wine groups with literary pretensions. Curious, I opened it. It wasn't book club information, it was a list of usernames and passwords. I recognized most of them immediately: our joint banking, her hospital email, Amazon, Netflix, standard stuff. But at the bottom of the list, 3 entries made me pause. I'd never heard of these email accounts. We'd been married since 2015, together since 2013. These were created during our marriage, accounts she'd never mentioned. Proton Mail and Tutanota were encrypted email services, the kind people used when they wanted privacy. Real privacy. My first instinct was to close the file, pretend I'd never seen it. Everyone deserved some privacy, even in marriage. Maybe she had a journal she emailed to herself. Maybe she was planning a surprise for my 40th birthday next year. Maybe she needed a space to vent about her mother's illness without worrying me. But Countdown Central nagged at me. Countdown to what? I stared at the screen for 10 minutes, cursor blinking, the rain still pounding outside. Finally, I opened a private browser window and typed in the Proton Mail address. The password worked. The inbox loaded slowly, revealing 5 years of emails, over 3,000 messages. The most recent was from yesterday, 2:47 p.m., when Melissa would have been driving to Eugene to see her mother. The sender's name made my blood turn to ice water. Brian Hutchinson. Brian. My college roommate. My best man. The guy who'd helped me pick out Melissa's engagement ring, who'd given that funny, touching speech at our wedding about how he'd never seen me happier than the day I met her. Brian, who'd moved to Seattle right after our wedding for that Amazon job, who I saw maybe twice a year when he came through Portland. The subject line was innocuous. Re-timeline update. I clicked it open. My darling Mel, I know yesterday was hard, seeing her looking so frail. But the oncologist's timeline hasn't changed, 6 to 8 months at most. I know it feels horrible to think this way, but we've waited so long already. 5 years of hiding, of pretending, of watching you go home to him every night when you should be with me. Once Dorothy passes and the inheritance clears, we can finally stop this charade. Yes, Patrick will be devastated, but he's stronger than you think. He'll recover. He'll find someone else, someone who can give him the simple, predictable life he wants. Someone who actually loves him. Remember, no changes to the pattern. Keep visiting your mom every weekend. Keep being the devoted daughter. The $3.2 million will set us up for life. We can have that house in Ballard we looked at. The one with the art studio for you and the home office for me. We can travel. Greece, Morocco, all the places we've dreamed about. Just 6 to 8 more months, my love. We've made it this far. All my love. B, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely scroll down. Email after email, going back years. Conversations about their future together. Their plans. Their love. Their conspiracy to wait for my mother-in-law to die so they could take her money and start their life together. Dorothy owned significant real estate in Oregon. Properties her late husband had purchased in the 1970s that had appreciated enormously. A commercial building in downtown Eugene. 3 rental properties in Portland. A vacation house on the coast. Melissa had mentioned the inheritance once or twice, always dismissively. When Mom goes, whenever that is, the properties will be more burden than blessing. All that maintenance and tenant management. $3.2 million. That's what my wife and my best friend were waiting for. That's what Dorothy's death was worth to them. I scrolled further back, my stomach churning. The emails from 2019 were especially cruel. That was when Dorothy was first diagnosed with cancer. Where I'd seen Melissa crying in our bathroom, devastated by her mother's diagnosis, these emails told a different story. The doctor says stage 2, possibly stage 3, Melissa had written. Treatable, but serious. If she doesn't respond to treatment, we could be looking at 18 to 24 months. Brian's response. I know it's awful to feel relieved, but maybe this is the universe's way of telling us we've waited long enough. We can't live this life forever. I found myself in the bathroom, emptying my stomach, the taste of bile mixing with my tears. When I could stand again, I returned to the computer. I needed to know everything. Every detail, every lie. The second email account, Future Planning 47, contained their practical preparations. Spreadsheets calculating the inheritance tax implications. Oregon divorce law research showing that inherited assets remained separate property if kept distinct from marital assets. real estate listings in Seattle. Brian had even created a business plan for a consulting firm they'd run together, funded by the inheritance. They'd researched everything: how long probate would take, how to handle the estate sale, how to structure the divorce to seem amicable. Melissa would be generous with me to avoid scrutiny. She'd let me keep the house, most of our savings. After all, she'd have millions. Countdown Central was the worst. It was where Melissa tracked her mother's decline in clinical detail. Spreadsheets with columns for date, weight, treatment type, response, estimated time remaining. She'd been tracking Dorothy's death like a project manager tracking a product launch. The most recent entry was from 3 days ago. Weight stable at 115. New chemo seems effective. Timeline pushed to 6 to 8 months. Frustrating, but manageable. Frustrating. Her mother's extended life was frustrating. I found a shared calendar in the account. Red markers for Dorothy's medical appointments. Blue markers for Melissa and Brian's secret meetings. Always when I was traveling for work or at conference. Green markers for my schedule, tracking when I'd be gone. Yellow markers for what they called milestones: Brian's 40th birthday, ideal Greece trip window, latest reasonable child window. They were tracking their lives against Dorothy's death, measuring missed opportunities against her survival. I went back to the first emails, needing to understand how this started. The earliest message was from December 2014, 3 months after I'd introduced Melissa to Brian at my birthday party, 6 months before our wedding. "I can't stop thinking about you," Brian had written. "I know this is wrong. Patrick is my best friend, but from the moment we met, I knew you were meant to be with me, not him." Melissa's response: "I feel it too, but Patrick is so good to me. He loves me so much. How can I hurt him like this?" "You're hurting him more by staying in a relationship built on a lie. You don't love him. You love me." By January 2015, 2 months before our wedding, they were fully involved. Physical and emotional. They'd met whenever I was at work, whenever they could steal moments. The wedding planning became their cover story for spending time together. Brian was so helpful, always available to taste cakes with Melissa when I was busy, to look at venues, to handle details. "Standing next to Patrick at the altar will be torture," Brian wrote the week before our wedding. "Watching him marry the woman I love, pretending to be happy for him." "It's just for now," Melissa responded. "We need stability. You need to establish yourself at Amazon. I need to build my career. And there's Mom's estate to think about. If I marry Patrick and then divorce him in a few years, everything looks normal. If I suddenly break up with him for you, everyone will know something was going on. We could lose everything." So I was the stability, the cover story, the placeholder husband while they waited for their real life to begin. I found myself laughing, a bitter sound in the empty house. All those nights Melissa worked late at the hospital. All those weekends she visited her mother alone because it was too depressing for me. All those times Brian happened to be in Portland for business, and we'd all have dinner together, me sitting there like an idiot while they eye-contacted each other across the table. The recovery software beeped. More files available. I found a folder labeled Insurance that wasn't about insurance at all. It contained photos. Melissa and Brian together. Not explicit, but intimate. Holding hands in a Seattle coffee shop. Kissing in a park I didn't recognize. Standing together in front of that Ballard house they'd mentioned, her head on his shoulder, both smiling at a future I wasn't part of. The photos were dated. They'd been careful to only meet when I was confirmed to be elsewhere, but they'd documented everything, building their history for the life after Dorothy died, after the divorce, when they could finally be public. I found videos too. Melissa practicing speeches, not for the hospital board, but for me, for our divorce conversation. Patrick, I need to talk to you about something, she said to her phone camera, her face composed and serious. I've been unhappy for a while now. It's not your fault. You're a good man. But I think we want different things. I think we've grown apart. Multiple takes. She'd practiced breaking my heart, refining her performance, getting the tone just right. Not too cold. That would make her look bad. Not too emotional. That might make me fight for us. Just the right balance of regret and determination. There was another video, this one recent, from last week. Melissa was in her car, probably in the hospital parking garage from the concrete walls visible behind her. Brian, baby, I know you're frustrated. I'm frustrated too. Mom looked better today than she has in months. This new treatment is working too well. But we've waited this long. What's another year? Maybe 2. We're still young. Well, young enough. I'm 36, you're 39. We can still have everything we want. The house, the kids, the life. We just have to be patient a little longer. She paused, looked directly at the camera. I love you. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. More than I thought I could love anyone. And soon, so soon, we'll be together for real. No more sneaking around, no more lies, no more Patrick, no more Patrick. Like I was a task on a checklist, a problem to be solved. The rain had stopped. The house was silent except for the hum of the computer. I sat in my office, surrounded by the debris of my fake life, and tried to think. My first instinct was to confront her. To call her right now, while she sat at her dying mother's bedside, and tell her I knew everything. But what would that accomplish? She'd deny it, or cry, or try to manipulate me the way she'd been doing for 5 years. My second instinct was to call Brian, to rage at him, to drive to Seattle and beat him senseless. But he was in Miami this week. I'd seen it on the calendar. Plus, violence wouldn't solve anything. It would just make me the bad guy in their story. Poor Melissa. Her abusive ex-husband attacked her boyfriend. Number. If they could plan for 5 years, I could plan for 5 days, or 5 weeks, or however long it took to destroy them as thoroughly as they'd planned to destroy me. I created my own encrypted email account. Then I began forwarding evidence. Every email, every photo, every video, every spreadsheet tracking Dorothy's decline. I organized them into folders. Affair evidence, financial fraud, inheritance conspiracy, elder abuse. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? Elder abuse? They were waiting for Dorothy to die, tracking her decline, frustrated when she survived. Melissa had power of attorney for Dorothy's healthcare and finances. Was she making decisions based on Dorothy's best interests or on her timeline with Brian? I found my answer in an email from 3 months ago. The oncologist wants to try an experimental treatment, Melissa wrote to Brian. It's shown amazing results in trials. Could extend life by 2 to 3 years. I told Mom it sounded too risky. Too many side effects. She's trusting my judgment. Brian responded, "Good call. 2 to 3 more years is impossible. We can't do this that much longer. Quality of life is more important anyway, right?" That's what you'll tell her. They'd been sabotaging Dorothy's treatment, not actively killing her, but discouraging treatments that might extend her life. That was criminal. That was beyond affair and fraud. That was attempted murder by omission. I started documenting everything properly. Screenshots with timestamps. Downloaded files with metadata preserved. I created backup drives, stored one in my office at work, another in a safety deposit box I opened the next morning. Then I started my research. Oregon divorce law. Oregon criminal statutes on elder abuse. Federal wire fraud laws. Identity theft penalties. Because I'd found evidence that Melissa had opened credit cards in my name, running up debts to make me look financially irresponsible for the divorce. She'd been comprehensive in her destruction of our marriage. Every angle covered, every base touched, except one. She'd never considered I might find out before Dorothy died. The next few days required Oscar-worthy performance on my part. Melissa came home Wednesday night, exhausted from sitting with her mother. "How is she?" I asked, pulling her into a hug she didn't really return. "Tired, but the doctors say she's responding well to the new treatment. Could have years left." She said it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "That's wonderful news," I said, kissing her forehead. "You must be so relieved." "Of course. It's amazing, miraculous, really." That night, she initiated intimacy. I found an email about it later. She'd been keeping a schedule. "Maintain 2 times weekly minimum to avoid suspicion," she'd written to Brian. "It's mechanical but necessary." I reciprocated, all while thinking about the videos I'd found of her practicing her divorce speech. The woman in my bed wasn't my wife. She was an actress playing a role, and had been for 5 years. Thursday, I took a sick day and drove to Eugene. Dorothy was at home, resting between treatments. She was delighted to see me. "Patrick!" "What a wonderful surprise. Melissa didn't tell me you were coming." "She doesn't know. I wanted to check on you myself." "How are you feeling?" Dorothy was thin but animated, her eyes bright despite the shadows beneath them. "Better than I have in months. This new treatment is really working. The oncologist is very optimistic." "That's wonderful." "You know, Melissa mentioned something about an experimental treatment a while back. Did you ever consider that?" Dorothy frowned. "She said it was too risky. Too many side effects for not enough benefit." "I trust her judgment. She's researched everything so thoroughly." "I'm sure she has," I said. "Dorothy, can I ask you something? Have you been reviewing your financial statements lately?" "Oh, Melissa handles all that. I gave her power of attorney when I was first diagnosed. It's such a relief not to worry about it." "I'm sure it is. But, you know, there have been a lot of scams lately targeting seniors, especially those with POAS. Would you like me to help you set up online access? Just so you can peek at things yourself from your tablet?" Her face lit up. "Would you?" "That would be wonderful. Melissa's always so busy, I hate to bother her with questions." We spent the afternoon setting up her accounts. Dorothy was sharp, despite the cancer and chemo. She caught discrepancies immediately. "Why is there a transfer for $5,000 to an account I don't recognize?" she asked, pointing at her screen. "That's something you should ask Melissa about," I said carefully. "Or maybe your accountant." "I don't have an accountant anymore. Melissa said she could handle everything herself, save the fees." By the time I left, Dorothy was questioning everything. Not suspiciously yet, but curiously. She'd always been independent, managed her own affairs until the cancer. Having control again, even just visibility, energized her. Friday, I contacted a divorce attorney. Not to file yet, but to understand my options. The attorney, Janet Morrison, was a sharp woman in her 50s who'd seen everything. Your wife has been thorough, she said, reviewing the evidence I'd brought. But she's also committed multiple felonies: identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse. If you file criminal charges, she gets nothing in the divorce. Oregon has fraud provisions that void any marital agreements in cases of criminal deception. What about the inheritance? Inherited assets are separate property, but only if obtained legally. If she's manipulated or defrauded her mother, if she's made medical decisions against her mother's best interests for financial gain, the inheritance could be challenged. Her mother could also disinherit her, of course, if she learned the truth. That weekend, Melissa went to Eugene as usual. I used the time to install legal recording devices in our house. Oregon is a one-party consent state. I could record conversations I was part of. I also installed motion-activated cameras in common areas. All legal, all in my own home. I captured gold within hours of her return. She was on the phone with Brian, standing in our kitchen while I pretended to work in my office. The old bat looked healthier today than she has in months, Melissa said. This is ridiculous. At this rate, she'll outlive us both. Patience, Mel. I'm 36, Brian. If we wait much longer, kids won't even be possible. We could have kids now. Leave Patrick. Forget the money. Are you insane? Without that inheritance, we have nothing. Your consulting business is hemorrhaging money. I'm supporting both of us on my hospital salary plus what I can skim from the joint accounts. We need that money. Then we need to consider other options. What other options? Oregon has death with dignity laws. If Dorothy decided she'd had enough, she'd never. She's fighting. She wants to see grandchildren, though fat chance of that happening. You could convince her. Tell her the pain will only get worse. Tell her she's being selfish, making you watch her deteriorate. That's evil, Brian. Is it more evil than what we're already doing? There was a long pause. I'll think about it, Melissa finally said. I had them. Conspiracy to commit murder, or at least coercion towards suicide. That was prison time, not just divorce. But I needed more. I needed to protect Dorothy while destroying them completely. I reached out to mutual friends from college, casually mentioning I was thinking of hiring Brian's consulting firm for a project. What consulting firm? Asked James, who'd been in our wedding party. Brian got laid off from Amazon 2 years ago. He's been living off his parents, last I heard. The news spread through our friend network like wildfire. Within days, Brian's parents were calling him, demanding explanations for the loans they'd given him, thinking he was between bonuses at Amazon. For Melissa, I began a subtler campaign. I started mentioning Dorothy's improvement to everyone. Our neighbors, our friends, her colleagues at the hospital when I dropped by with lunch. It's miraculous, I'd say. The doctors think she might have 5, even 10 more years. Melissa must be so relieved. The reactions were telling. People who genuinely cared about Melissa were happy. But I could see the strain in Melissa's eyes when people congratulated her on her mother's improvement, when they talked about all the years they'd have together. I also began feeding false information to Melissa, mentioning that Dorothy seemed confused when I'd talked to her on the phone. I hadn't. Suggesting her speech was slurred at dinner. We hadn't had dinner. Creating an impression that Dorothy was declining cognitively. Melissa reported all of this to Brian eagerly, thinking the end was near. They started making concrete plans. Brian gave notice on his Seattle apartment. Melissa began sorting our possessions, deciding what to keep and what to leave behind. They booked flights to Greece for 6 months out. all of it creating a paper trail of their conspiracy. The breakthrough came when I discovered Melissa had been drugging me. I'd wondered why I always slept so deeply on nights she had her late calls with Brian. A blood test confirmed the presence of diphenhydramine, Benadryl, in my system at levels consistent with regular dosing. She'd been putting it in my evening tea. Not enough to harm me, just enough to ensure I slept through her late-night conversations. It was assault. Another felony to add to the list. I started swapping the tea bags, drinking caffeine while pretending to get drowsy. Those nights, I heard everything. Her video calls with Brian where they discussed their future, planned their children's names, decided which of my belongings to sell versus donate. Patrick's grandmother's ring should probably go back to his family, Melissa said one night. I never liked it anyway. Too traditional. That ring had been in my family for 4 generations. Melissa had cried when I'd proposed with it, said it was perfect, that she'd never want another ring. 3 weeks into my investigation, I had enough evidence to destroy them both. But I wanted to do it right. I wanted them to experience the same slow dissolution they'd planned for me. I created a timeline of my own. Not counting down to someone's death, but to the death of their conspiracy. First, I had a friend who worked in tech reach out to Brian about a job opportunity. A real one, with a startup in Portland. Brian was desperate enough to accept the interview. The catch? The company did thorough background checks. When they called Amazon for a reference, they learned he'd been terminated for cause, something Brian had hidden from everyone, including Melissa. The termination was for expense fraud. Brian had been submitting false reports, claiming client dinners that never happened, travel that he'd used to visit Melissa. Amazon had quietly let him go with a severance package that included a non-disclosure agreement. But when asked directly by another employer, they were legally obligated to confirm the termination and its cause. Brian didn't get the job, but worse, the startup's CEO knew people. Word spread in tech circles that Brian Hutchinson was untouchable. His consulting firm, already failing, lost its last 2 clients within a week. For Melissa, I arranged something special. Her hospital was launching a new ethics committee. I anonymously suggested she'd be perfect for it, given her senior position and spotless reputation. The hospital board agreed. Melissa couldn't refuse without raising questions. The committee met weekly to discuss ethical issues in healthcare, conflicts of interest, patient advocacy, end-of-life care. Every meeting was recorded for legal compliance. During the 3rd meeting, a case came up about a family member with power of attorney making decisions that seemed contrary to a patient's best interests. The discussion was theoretical, but Melissa had to participate, had to argue for patient autonomy and against financial conflicts of interest. Anyone who would manipulate a dying relative for money is the lowest form of human, she said, her voice passionate and convincing. We have a sacred duty to protect the vulnerable. The irony was lost on everyone but me. I'd requested that case be discussed, anonymously submitting it as a concerned community member. Now I had Melissa on record, condemning exactly what she was doing. Dorothy, meanwhile, was thriving. The treatment Melissa had discouraged was working better than anyone expected. Her cancer was in remission. She'd gained weight, started walking daily, even joined a book club. She'd also started questioning more things. The transfers Melissa had made, the investment changes. The fact that Melissa had been telling people Dorothy was declining when she was actually improving. Patrick, Dorothy called me one evening. I need to ask you something in confidence. Is Melissa all right? She seems different lately. stressed, and some of the things she's been doing with my accounts don't make sense. What kind of things? She liquidated some bonds last month, said it was for medical expenses, but my insurance has covered everything. And the money went to an account I don't recognize. Have you asked her about it? She says it's for future medical costs, that she's being prudent. But something feels wrong. Trust your instincts, I told her. Maybe talk to an independent financial advisor. Get a second opinion. Dorothy did more than that. She hired a forensic accountant. The findings were damning. Melissa had been moving money in ways that benefited her, not Dorothy. Nothing overtly criminal yet, but clear preparation for rapid asset transfer upon death. Dorothy revoked Melissa's power of attorney immediately. She didn't confront her daughter yet. The accountant advised building a complete case first. But Melissa lost access to all of Dorothy's accounts overnight. Melissa was frantic when she came home that night. Mom's accounts are all locked. The bank says there's been suspicious activity. Someone must have stolen her identity. That's terrible, I said. Did you call the police? Mom doesn't want to. She says she's handling it, but she's not thinking clearly. The cancer, the medication, it's affecting her judgment. She seemed pretty sharp when I talked to her yesterday. Melissa's head snapped up. You talked to her? When? She called to thank me for helping her with her tablet. She's been teaching herself to video call. Isn't that great? The color drained from Melissa's face. If Dorothy was competent enough to master technology, she couldn't claim diminished capacity. That night, I heard Melissa on the phone with Brian, panic in her voice. She changed everything, all the passwords, all the access. I can't even see the account balances anymore. This is a disaster. Without monitoring the estate, we can't plan anything. I know that, Brian. God, what if she's changed her will? She wouldn't disinherit you. You're her only child. I wouldn't be so sure. She's been different lately, suspicious. Someone's been talking to her. Patrick? No, he's clueless. He actually thinks Mom's recovery is a good thing. He keeps talking about all the time we'll have together. I smiled in the dark. Let them wonder. Let them worry. The next phase was psychological. I started leaving subtle hints around the house. A book about infidelity on the coffee table. A documentary about financial fraud playing when Melissa came home. An article about Oregon's elder abuse laws printed and left by the computer. Melissa noticed, of course. But what could she say? Why are you reading about affairs? Would open a conversation she couldn't afford to have. I also started changing my routine, coming home at unexpected times, suggesting we visit Dorothy together, proposing couples therapy to strengthen our marriage. We don't need therapy, Melissa said quickly. We're fine. Are we? You seem distant lately, stressed. I want to help. It's just Mom's illness. It's taking a toll. But she's doing so well. The doctors are optimistic. Right, yes, of course, it's wonderful. Her smile was brittle, almost pained. I scheduled the therapy anyway, told her it would help us both deal with the stress of Dorothy's situation. Melissa couldn't refuse without seeming suspicious. The therapist was excellent. Dr. Sarah Perkins had a way of asking questions that seemed innocent, but cut deep. Melissa, how do you envision your life in 5 years? Oh, probably similar to now. Working at the hospital, taking care of Mom. And your marriage? Still married, of course. Growing old with Patrick. Patrick, same question. Kids, hopefully. Melissa and I have talked about starting a family. Maybe a house with a bigger yard. And hopefully Dorothy will be there to see her grandchildren. I watched Melissa's jaw clench. Every word I said extended her timeline, pushed her dreams with Brian further into an impossible future. Have you two discussed children recently? Dr. Perkins asked. Not in detail, Melissa said quickly. I'm ready whenever you are, honey, I said, taking her hand. I know you wanted to wait until your mom's situation was more stable, but with her doing so well, maybe it's time? Melissa squeezed my hand so hard her nails dug into my palm. Maybe. We'll see. After 3 sessions, doctor. Perkins pulled me aside. I normally wouldn't say anything, but I'm concerned. Your wife exhibits signs of severe disconnection. She's present physically, but entirely absent emotionally. Has something happened recently? Not that I know of, I lied. But I'm worried too. Keep coming to sessions. Sometimes these things reveal themselves over time. Brian, meanwhile, was falling apart. His parents had cut him off financially after learning about his lies. His apartment lease was up, and he couldn't afford renewal. His consulting firm was officially bankrupt. He started pressuring Melissa for money. I saw the Venmo transfers. Small amounts at first. $500 here, $1,000 there. Then larger. $5,000. $8,000. All from Melissa's personal account, which she'd been funding by skimming from our joint accounts. I documented every transfer. More evidence of financial fraud. Then came the breaking point. Dorothy announced she was selling one of her rental properties. Not because she needed money for medical bills, but because she wanted to donate the proceeds to the cancer research center that had developed her treatment. $500,000, she told me over lunch. It could fund research that saves other lives. That's incredibly generous. Melissa thinks I'm being foolish. She says I should keep the property for her inheritance. Dorothy's voice was bitter. As if I'm already dead. As if my only value is what I'll leave behind. You're worth so much more than money, Dorothy. You're a good son-in-law, Patrick. Better than I deserve, considering. Considering what? She looked at me for a long moment. Considering I suspect my daughter doesn't appreciate what she has. That night, Melissa was apoplectic. She's giving away our future, she raged to Brian on the phone, not knowing I was recording everything. $500,000 to charity. It's insane. Can you contest it? Claim she's not mentally competent? With what proof? She's sharper than ever. She's even talking about selling more properties, setting up a foundation. This is a nightmare. We need to do something. We can't wait for her to die naturally anymore. She could live another decade and give away everything before then. What are you suggesting? I don't know. But we need options. Real options. I had what I needed. Conspiracy to commit murder. Discussion of financial elder abuse. Everything required to not just divorce Melissa, but to send her to prison. But I wanted more than legal victory. I wanted poetic justice. I started the final phase on a Thursday. First, I sent an anonymous package to Brian's parents, containing excerpts from his emails with Melissa. Not the intimate parts, but the financial planning. The waiting for Dorothy to die. The lies about his job. Their response was swift. They formally disinherited him and sent copies of their new will to all their children, making clear why Brian was excluded. Second, I arranged for Dorothy's oncologist to call her directly about the experimental treatment Melissa had discouraged. The doctor was confused why Dorothy had declined it, given its success rate. Dorothy realized Melissa had lied to her, had actively discouraged treatment that could extend her life. Third, I filed for divorce, but not quietly. I filed citing fraud, identity theft, and attempted poisoning. These were criminal charges that triggered automatic investigation. I also requested emergency restraining orders preventing Melissa from accessing our joint accounts or entering our home without police supervision. I timed everything perfectly. Thursday afternoon, Dorothy received the call from her oncologist. Thursday evening, Brian's parents confronted him about the emails. Friday morning, Melissa woke to find herself locked out of our bank accounts. Friday afternoon, she was served with divorce papers at the hospital in front of colleagues. Friday evening, when she tried to come home, she found the locks changed and a restraining order taped to the door. But the masterstroke came on Saturday. Dorothy had invited Melissa to lunch to discuss the oncologist's call. Melissa thought she could explain it away, maintain her devoted daughter act. She didn't know Dorothy had also invited her estate attorney, the forensic accountant, and an elder abuse specialist from Adult Protective Services. Melissa walked into what she thought was lunch and found an intervention. "Sit down, Melissa," Dorothy said, her voice steel. "We need to discuss your attempts to steal my estate and hasten my death." The evidence was presented systematically. The financial transfers, the hidden accounts, the emails with Brian discussing her death timeline, the discouragement of life-extending treatment. Melissa tried to deny, then to explain, then to cry. None of it worked. "You're no longer my daughter," Dorothy said finally. "You're written out of my will. All properties will be donated to cancer research upon my death, which I hope won't be for many years. You'll receive nothing. Ever." "Mom, please." "That's the other thing. I'm filing a restraining order. You're not to contact me again. If you attempt to visit me, you'll be arrested." "You can't do this. I'm your daughter." "No, you were my daughter. Now you're just someone who wanted me dead for money." Melissa left the restaurant in hysterics. She called Brian, but he didn't answer. His phone had been disconnected for non-payment. She tried to go to a hotel, but her credit cards were frozen, part of the criminal investigation into identity theft. Her hospital had suspended her pending investigation of the fraud allegations. She had no job, no home, no family, no friend to turn to. She ended up at her cousin's house in Salem, begging for a place to stay. The criminal investigation moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. Melissa was charged with identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, and assault for the drugging. She pled guilty to avoid trial, receiving 2 years probation, 6 months house arrest, and was ordered to pay full restitution. Brian fled Oregon before charges could be filed against him. Last anyone heard, he was washing dishes in Florida under an assumed name, his tech career destroyed, his family estranged, his dreams of millions replaced by minimum wage reality. The divorce was finalized in 8 months. Melissa received nothing. No alimony, no assets, no sympathy from the judge who'd reviewed the evidence. She was ordered to pay me damages for the identity theft and emotional distress. Dorothy lived another 6 years. She saw the research center she'd funded make a breakthrough in immunotherapy. She traveled to Europe, something she'd always dreamed of but never done while waiting for the right time. She volunteered at the hospital where Melissa had worked, becoming beloved by the staff who'd once reported to her daughter. She died peacefully in her sleep at age 78, her estate worth $4.2 million by then. Every penny went to cancer research, funding studies that would save thousands of lives. At her funeral, hundreds came to pay respects. Melissa wasn't among them. The restraining order was still in effect. I struggled for a while after everything came out. Trust issues, therapy, difficulty forming new relationships. But I built myself back up. I changed careers, moving from software architecture to cybersecurity consulting. My personal experience with deception making me valuable to companies worried about insider threats. I met Sarah at a security conference 2 years after the divorce. She was presenting on social engineering tactics. When she heard my story, she said, "You turned your pain into purpose." That's rare. We married last spring. Small ceremony. Dorothy attended, frail but radiant, telling everyone how proud she was of her real son. She passed 2 months later, having lived long enough to see me happy again. Melissa works at a call center in Salem now, making $15 an hour, living in a studio apartment. The conspiracy emails were leaked online during the criminal proceedings, making her infamous in Oregon. She can't escape her past. Every job interview, every date, every new acquaintance eventually Googles her name and finds the story of the woman who counted down to her mother's death for money. The last I heard, she'd started a blog about redemption and second chances. It has 3 subscribers. The comments are mostly from people whose parents are fighting cancer, telling her exactly what they think of her. Brian tried to reconnect last year, sending me a Facebook message. "Patrick, I know you'll never forgive me, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry. Melissa and I were monsters. You deserved better." I didn't respond. But I did forward the message to his probation officer, noting that he was violating the no-contact order. His probation was extended by 2 years. The laptop that started it all sits in my home office now, repaired and functional. I use it occasionally, each boot up a reminder that broken things sometimes reveal more truth than perfect ones. The hard drive that failed contained 5 years of deception, but its failure gave me back my life. Sarah knows the whole story. On our wedding day, she said something that stays with me. They spent 5 years planning a future that required death. You took 5 weeks to build a future that celebrates life. That's the difference between conspiracy and justice. She was right. Melissa and Brian's countdown was always about waiting for death, measuring their dreams against someone else's mortality. They turned love into a transaction, marriage into a con game, family into a financial instrument. But here's what they never understood. Dorothy's real inheritance wasn't money. It was the strength to fight, the courage to trust, the wisdom to know that some things matter more than millions. She passed those gifts to me, not through blood, but through choice. Not through death, but through life. The house in Ballard that Melissa and Brian had picked out sold last month. I know because I check sometimes, curious about the life they'd planned. It went for $1.8 million to a young family. 2 kids, a dog, normal jobs, probably a massive mortgage. But also probably real love, honest partnership, the kind of future built on truth rather than conspiracy. Sometimes I drive by our old house, the one where I discovered everything. A young couple lives there now. They painted the shutters blue, added a garden, turned my home office into a nursery. Life moving forward, spaces being reclaimed, wounds becoming scars, becoming stories, becoming wisdom. The coffee shop where Brian and Melissa used to meet, secretly, is now a pottery studio. The hospital where Melissa worked has a new ethics committee, with stronger oversight after her scandal. The Cancer Research Center Dorothy funded has her name on it now. The Dorothy Williams Center for Immunotherapy Research. Her legacy isn't an inheritance Melissa waited for. but lives saved by research Melissa tried to prevent. I learned something through all of this. Betrayal isn't just about the lies told, but about the truths twisted. Melissa took my trust and weaponized it. Brian took our friendship and monetized it. They took Dorothy's cancer and turned it into a countdown clock. But exposure to poison sometimes creates immunity. I'm better now at reading people, at seeing the gaps between words and actions, at recognizing when someone's performance doesn't match their purpose. That's made me better at my job, better in my relationships, better at being the person Dorothy saw in me when everyone else saw a victim. Sarah's pregnant now, due in 6 months. We're having a daughter. We're going to name her Dorothy. When she's old enough, I'll tell her about her namesake, not about the conspiracy or the countdown or the cruelty, but about a woman who fought cancer with grace, who gave millions to save strangers, who chose her family not by blood but by character. I'll tell her that inheritance isn't about what you leave behind when you die, but what you give forward while you live. That love isn't about waiting for perfect timing, but about choosing imperfect people perfectly. That marriage isn't a placeholder for a better option, but a promise to be each other's best option. And if she ever asks about second chances, about redemption, about forgiveness, I'll tell her the truth. Some people count down to other people's deaths. Some people count up to their own lives. The difference between them isn't opportunity or money or luck, it's choice. Melissa and Brian chose conspiracy. Dorothy chose charity. I chose justice. Sarah chose trust despite my baggage. Every day we choose. Not once, like in the movies, but constantly, in small moments and large ones, in emails sent and deleted, in truths told and withheld, in love performed and love lived. The laptop still works. The marriage didn't. The mother-in-law became more of a parent than blood had made her. The best friend became the worst enemy. The inheritance went to research. The countdown reached 0, but not how anyone planned. That's the thing about elaborate plans that require someone else's death. They assume death is the only variable that matters. But life has infinite variables. A laptop breaks. A password is found. A son-in-law visits unexpectedly. A mother lives longer than expected. A conscience develops too late. A conspiracy collapses under the weight of its own cruelty. 5 years they planned. 5 weeks I destroyed it. 6 years. Dorothy lived beyond their timeline. $0 they inherited. The math is poetic in its precision. But the real calculation is simpler. They counted down. I counted on truth. Truth won. It always does, eventually. Sometimes it just needs a broken laptop to reveal itself.